Hello everyone. For you today, I have the two Banshee builds that I promised you like 3 weeks ago. The first one is a pretty meta build that you've seen variations of before for sure, but it's my take on it. And then the second one is a meme build that's pretty freaking cool. It's mechanically involved, it's sort of difficult to execute, and it's a ton of fun. So let's get right into it. I have a video on Banshee's abilities already, so if you don't know anything about her, you should probably go watch that first. But to quickly recap, her first ability, Sonic Boom, pushes back enemies, and with her augment, it can strip armor. The sonar, it puts a spot on enemies' bodies, and when you shoot it, it does extra damage, and you can spread it with her ability augment. Silence, it makes it so enemies can't use their abilities, like basically when Eximus shoot out fire or electricity or any Eximus ability, they can't do it. The Acolytes can't use their abilities. And then if you put on her augment, you can do a finisher on an enemy and it'll do extra damage. And her last ability is a extremely bad ability. I don't even know what it's called. Soundquake. It does nothing basically, so I put Gloom on Banshee. It's a very common thing to do, but it's just amazing. It makes it so when enemies are stunned by silence, they're stunned for way longer. And then also when you push them over a Sonic Boom, it takes them way longer to get up. So it's a lot of CC. So the goal of this first Banshee build is to just be a meta Steel Path build. You can run this on almost literally any mission, and it's amazing. You just provide your passive buffs to your teammates, your silence, your gloom, and then also the damage increase. The sonar, you'll just run up to enemies, make sure the sonar's on them, one-shot them, it'll apply more sonar on them, and then you just kill them. For your survivability, you can shield gate with her 2. She can always just apply it over herself. Her 3 can shield gate, but you cannot cast it until it's over. And then also you can shield gate by doing a rolling guard and then doing 2 of the pushes. And lastly, for survivability, I like Vazarin on, especially for disruption game modes. And you can do a Vazarin dash for 5 seconds of invincibility. And I didn't know this, but with you have like having 75 shields is pretty normal as like your cap with a decaying dragon key. And if you roll and then wait a few seconds and do a Vazarin dash, the shield regen will be enough to cap out your shields, so you have a full shield gate again. That's probably common information, but it was news to me. On this build, you're actually able to use any focus skull you'd like. I just use Vazarin because it makes it way more chill. So for the actual build, I have Brief Respite on in the Aura slot to shield gate, and along with that, you'll need 2 Augur mods on. I put them both on my Epitaph. For this build, you only need 1, but for the next build, you do need 2. So I just have the same Epitaph for both builds to make it easy. Prime Sure-Footed, because it's Prime Sure-Footed. Equilibrium for more energy. Umbral Intensify for the amount of power strength you need to strip armor right off the bat. You need 143% ability strength to strip 100% armor. And then Prime Flow, because you need a ton of energy because you're going to be casting all the time. You're going to have Gloom running, and you're going to need it to shield gate. I have Stretch on to make the Silence and Gloom bigger. You can put on Overextended. So yeah, you can put on Overextended, and then you will have to use Molt Augmented to get it to the point where your Sonic Boom strips in one cast. But I found it's extremely hard to survive for that amount of time, even with Vazarin. And you can definitely do it, but it's just annoying. So I put on Stretch just so I have enough power strength right off the bat. And then also if you do that, your Gloom won't have as much slow. So that also makes it why it's hard to survive. Prime Continuity for more duration on your abilities. Rolling Guard for survivability. The ability augment mod called Resonance. This is the one that makes it so when you shoot the little spots from the sonar ability, it will then spread out to other enemies, so you can keep the chain going. And then Sonic Fracture to do the armor strip off the first ability. For the Arcanes, you need Arcane Energize because you're going to be casting like crazy. And then for this Arcane slot, you can use anything you want, but I think Molt Augmented is really good because it makes the slow on Gloom much better. And then also it'll make it so when you shoot the designated spots of sonar, it'll do more damage. For your energy colors on Banshee, it's extremely important to have black as the first color because otherwise Silence will continue to make a color go over the enemies, making it hard to see where the targets are from sonar. And then for the second color, for the sonar target, you want it to be all white. It's just the easiest thing to see on an enemy, especially when there's tons of other buffs going on. For the weapons, I like to use the Felarx because there's nothing you will not be able to kill, especially when you strip their armor and affect them with sonar and shoot the spot on them. This is the build I use. You can just copy it straight up. I like to use Viral because you're going to be stripping armor a lot, so this will do the most damage against most fleshes. Then some other important mods is Galvanized Savvy, because when you prime enemies, this is multiplicative damage, so it'll do a ton of damage compared to some other weapons. Tactical Pump, because it takes 3 years to reload this weapon. And then the Galvanized Acceleration, especially if you're going to be shooting Demlists, because you kind of got to stand at a small distance away from them. This will make it so your damage fall off on a shotgun is not as bad. Banshee's really amazing for the Disruption game mode because her first ability pushes the Demlist back and strips their armor immediately. And then you can just prime them up, use your 2, find the spot on them, and shoot it. Then I use Primary Dexterity, but you can also use Primary Merciless. This will also give you more reload speed on top of the Prime Tactical Pump, but I like to use this because I use my Exodia Contagion melee weapon a lot, so this will make it so your damage is up much more often. The Epitaph build is just a normal primer build. I like to prime with Viral and Electricity, and then I have multi-shot and attack speed on it. And lastly, you need the 2 Augur mods, like I said earlier. For the melee weapon, I'm always using my Exodia Contagion. I'm not going to stop using it now, especially when I'm stripping enemy armor. You just throw some enemies to the corner and then throw this Exodia Contagion at them and they just die. It's great. I do have a Riven on here. You can just replace this with the, what's it called? Gladiator something, Gladiator Might for more crit damage. Then I like to put Corrosive on it, just so if I don't strip enemy armor, it does more damage. But usually you're going to be stripping it, so it really doesn't matter what you have on it. Then Berserker Fury, so I can throw more often. The Amalgam Organ Shatter for my crit damage and heavy attack windup speed, because if you do a double jump and aim, then start sliding and do a heavy attack, you do a heavy attack that does way more damage and way more crit chance. And for the pet, it's going to be the Panzer Vulpaphyla, because it is the endgame pet that you have to use, basically. And it's so you can use Synth Fiber to be able to pick up health orbs for your equilibrium, and then Synth Deconstruct, so the Panzer Vulpaphyla, when it attacks enemies, it will drop health orbs. And lastly on this build, for the Archon Shards, I suggest just putting the casting speed Archon Shards on, as many as you really can fit. I like to put on 4, I just don't have 2 on right now for some testing. But it's because when you need a shield gate with your 2, you're just locked into place. I'm holding forward here. And your shield gate starts as soon as you use an ability, so that means you have less time to do actions after your shield gate. So the more casting speed you have on, the more active time you have of invincibility. Alright, so this second build is definitely pretty complicated, but the main idea of it is that we will be using a low duration Banshee to be able to spam silence for a lot of stunning. And then also we will be doing a finisher nuke with Marked for Death. So it'll be a stun, Marked for Death, and then finish them off, and they die. There's a lot that goes into this build to be able to kill every type of enemy and be able to survive. You will be able to shield gate with these 3 abilities. Your Sonar, this is really just a shield gate because it's going to be going away so fast, you really can't get much value out of it. The Silence itself you'll be able to shield gate with, and then also the Marked for Death will shield gate. One of the main weaknesses in this build is that when you come out of your finisher animation, you have an opportunity to die. And that's because, assuming there's like an Eximus heavy gunner or something shooting at you, they're not going to be stunned by the silence. So they'll shoot off the shield of your silence, and you will start being invincible for the 1.3 seconds of a shield gate. So it'll be silence, shield shot off, this, your shield shot off, and then once you do this, your shield will be gone, so you'll have an opportunity to be killed. So we got to make sure that our finisher animation is fast enough that we can cast an ability within the invincibility time frame. I'll talk about weapon choice in a little bit and why I'm picking this weapon. There are other weapons you could probably pick, but the important thing for your finisher animation to be as fast as possible, your attack speed does not matter at all. Your finisher only is affected by the amount of attack speed on your build, and it doesn't look at the attack speed stat of your weapon. And it maxes out at 50% attack speed, so you can put on Primed Fury, you can have a Riven mod with 50% attack speed, but I just am using Quickening for 40% and then Fury for 30%, so that puts me at 70, which is well over the 50% cap. So to show you exactly what I mean by having a invincibility window the size of your finisher, right here in this clip I've already cast Silence, so right here I cast Marked for Death, and you can see that my shield went up. I'm not getting shot because it's hard to exactly show it, but I cast Marked for Death, which would start a shield gate. Assuming that my shield immediately gets shot off, I will start performing my finisher. And then here near the end, at the very moment right here, I will start casting Sonar for more shield. And my shield goes up, which would then give me another shield gate. And this is a 1.2 second clip, which is under the 1.3 second window for the invincibility of a shield gate. In this clip, I'm using a macro to spam my buttons as fast as possible. You have to press your confirm button, like whatever you go into menus with or pick up things with. That's how you start your finisher, so I'm using a macro to spam that. And then at the very end, I'm using a macro to spam my second ability. Right here, you have basically a 0.1 second window because this is 1.2 seconds for your animation. So you either got to learn the timings or you got to put on a macro, or these are like fringe cases. This is not always going to happen. Most of the time, all the enemies are going to be stunned and no one's shooting at you, and you're going to be going after the Xmas anyway. So this isn't going to happen all the time, but this is just a surefire way that you're not going to die as long as you're doing like a front-facing finisher animation and there's like a ton of Xmas around shooting you or something like that. Also on this build, I have on 4 casting speed shards because Banshee's animations take a really long time, so since we're ability spamming, this feels really good. Also, this allows you to go into your finisher animation as fast as possible once you cast Marked for Death, so you have as much time at the end to cast Sonar to shield gate again. Also, your last shard, you can pick what you want, but I picked more energy at the start of a mission because since this is ability spam, you kind of want a little leeway at the beginning of your mission to start building up your energy. If you want, you can get rid of 2 of these casting speed shards and use the Matter-Eye Focus School because the power of transfer gives you 50% casting speed when you switch to your Warframe for 20 seconds. You can actually just pick whatever focus school you want for this build. I go for Vazarin because in endurance runs or just any mission, it's just extremely comfortable, and I don't really need anything else on this build besides maybe armor strip in very, very fringe cases. Then for the actual Banshee build, I'm using Brief Respite since I'm shield gating, and then along with that, on my secondary, I'm using 2 Augur mods to make sure that I'm able to do a full shield gate with all 3 of my abilities. Then Prime Sure-Footed because it's Prime Sure-Footed. And then this is a low duration Banshee build. You're using just completely as low duration as you can get in this game. And for that, you need Fleeting Expertise and Transient Fortitude for max negative duration. And then to shield gate, since you're using Fleeting Expertise, your efficiency would be 160%, so it would cost nothing to cast these abilities, so you wouldn't be able to turn them into shields or max shields. So I'm putting on a rank 5 Blind Rage to bring the efficiency back down so you can shield gate again. Also, having on ability strength on this build is a plus. So since we're ability spamming, we need primed flow and equilibrium to keep our energy up and have a large energy pool. Next, we're putting on overextended for as much range as possible on our Marked for Death because this is not a AoE that goes through walls. It's a line of sight one, so collecting more people to kill, it will be very beneficial. Then we have Unrolling Guard for survivability, and then Savage Silence because we absolutely need it for the finisher damage, and then also this is what allows us to perform a finisher on an enemy that's affected by the silence stun. Then for our arcanes, we have Arcane Energize for more energy regen, and then for the other arcane, you can put on whatever you want, but I have on Arcane Trickery because it just provides the most comfort for this build since we're going to be performing finishers all the time. You won't be invincible all the time, but when you are, especially when you're going against acolytes, it's extremely nice, and it'll just help make the build not a spam fest. So for the melee weapon, you want to pick a weapon that does the highest amount of finisher damage as you can possibly get in one single hit. This is because Marked for Death makes it so when you cast it on an enemy, the next instance of damage that they receive from you, not like your pet or anyone else, will be transferred to the enemies in the AoE area. So you can see they took like 27 damage because this is doing like no damage right now because it's not modded to do damage to armored enemies and it wasn't a finisher. But you can clearly see if I do this, they just get destroyed. And the reason that Marked for Death did so little damage when I did a heavy attack versus the finisher is because Marked for Death makes it so the type of damage that you did to the marked enemy is transferred to the other enemies. So since I'm doing a finisher, it's considered true damage, which applies directly to their health. The only thing that blocks true damage is shields. I could not find anywhere on the internet that told me how much the shields blocked it, but it's very clear that Corpus survive finishers much, much better than any other faction. I'm pretty sure you could take this to level cap against Grenier and maybe Infested. I've done like a 3-hour run against Grenier when my build was way worse, when I was still trying to figure it out. But the Infested seem to die just as easily as Grenier do, but high level Corpus and Corpus Eximus seem to tank finishers like it's no problem. The reason I chose a hammer as my weapon is because each weapon class has a multiplier on it for finishers, and the multiplier is different for front and back finishers, or a stealth finisher versus a vulnerable finisher, which is the one we're going for. We're setting the enemies up to be finished, so that's considered a vulnerable one. And the hammer is the only class that has a 12 times multiplier on it for a single hit. All other weapons have either a 8 times or one that does it like a higher multiplier and multiple hits is what it's considered. But this is the highest single hit multiplier that you can have on a weapon on a front or back finisher. So these are the parts that I put on it. It's just modded for the highest base damage and a high crit chance. It's because we want to get into tier 1 crit territory, because crits do count into finisher damage, and you don't want to be not critting, so I'm just dipping right into the 100% crit chance. To make this build, I did do a lot of math and equations, which I definitely do not commonly do. I think this took me a whole day to come up with this build specifically, and I'm not Asian Vasion, so I can't just spout off numbers and put it on the screen and have it make sense, but this is definitely the highest damage you're going to get out of a weapon, and I'll explain each mod. So Prime Pressure Point and Prime Fever Strike are the highest base damage increases. Every other mod on here is going to start multiplying into these, but having these two on it are just really good base damage increases. I don't know the right terminology for it. And then Amalgam Organ Shatter is only for the heavy attack windup speed in case you want to throw an Exodia Contagion out. The critical damage doesn't matter that much on this because the critical damage is in the same category as the weapon multiplier. So since the hammer already has a 12 times multiplier, this just ends up adding into it and making it, a 15.7 times multiplier. So putting on crit damage isn't going to increase it as much, and it's just kind of wasting space. Sacrificial Steel, because on 32% crit chance weapons, it puts it over 100% crit chance. If your weapon that you're using doesn't have 100% crit chance after using this, I would use Sacrificial Pressure instead of Prime Pressure Point. When picking your weapon, you only really need to look at crit chance and the base damage of the weapon. So looking at the other hammers, anything with crit chance like this that's close to 32 or above, you could pick. So the Fragor, Prime Heliocore, and the Kuva Shieldig. The base damage on this would also go up when you get a Progenitor. And then the Sancti Magistar are all weapons that could also work for this build. So for the rest of this build, we have a faction mod on it because this just adds the 55% more damage onto our finisher, whatever we're already doing. So that's a pretty huge increase, especially compared to any other mod we could put onto here. And then we have the Finishing Touch mod, which increases our finisher damage. And this is multiplicative with Banshee's Savage Silence finisher damage increase. So this adds a ton of damage onto the build. And one good thing with the Rabvi hammer is it has a high Riven disposition. If you just wanted to see a bigger number, you could get a Rabvi Riven with finisher damage on it, and it would just be crazy. Also, you could get finisher damage attack speed, then you could slot in 2 more things on here to maybe make your Exodia Contagion work better, like Killing Blow, and then another element mod, depending on what element you want. Then, as I said, you need 50% attack speed for your finisher to go as fast as possible, so I have these 2 mods on here to get to that because I don't have Primed Fury. So one of the main hiccups in this build is that you cannot affect Eximus with Savage Silence, so you cannot finish them. But there's this fancy little mod that probably not many people know about, where you shoot them with the Bronco, and you can finish them. This is because the Bronco has a mod called Dizzying Rounds, and when you shoot an enemy from less than 8 meters away, they are opened up to finishers. It says it stuns them and opens them up to finishers. They do not need to be stunned, so this works over Eximus Overguard, and you can just finish them over Eximus Overguard, and it's awesome. And this allows you to, when you're running around and see one enemy at a time, and you don't want to cast all your abilities to kill one enemy, you can just shoot them with this and then finish them off. So for the rest of this build, I put on Primed Quick Draw because you only have a 2-shot mag, so this is just to reload because you're always reloading. The 2 Auger mods because you absolutely need them for shield gating. And then I put on Magnetic so you could prime, this is a bad priming weapon. It's like a shotgun pistol, and you'll be able to get 3 magnetic procs per shot. And since the true damage is somehow blocked or negated by shields. This helps you get through the shields a little bit better if you're trying. And then Amalgam Barrel Diffusion for dodge speed, honestly, but then the multi-shot also helps you with your priming. For your primary, the only reason you have it on here is to help kill some enemies at the beginning of the game when it's hard to get energy. Once you start having Xmas spawn more often, your energy will stay up constantly with no problem, especially usually solo missions or it's harder to keep energy going, and that's what this is for. But also the main reason is that you need to kill Acolytes. Acolytes have the damage resistance that makes it so you can't like one-shot them, and the only thing that really affects that is crit chance and huge amounts of damage. So your finisher, you cannot finish Acolytes, and then finishing enemies near Acolytes will only do a small amount of damage, so you need a weapon for them. Weapons I would suggest are the Kuva Brahma, the Kuva Tsar, or the Kuva Chuker. This is my Kuva Chuker build for killing Acolytes right now. This is my half-assed Kuva Tsar build. Basically, the idea of all these builds is just corrosive damage, because you don't need to armor strip the Acolytes to kill them, and then multi-shot and Hunter Munitions. And for the weapon I'm actually using, I'm using the Kuva Brahma. And again, it's just corrosive, Hunter Munitions for some slash on the Acolyte. Then I have a Bane mod to kill whatever I'm going up against, which I had Grenier in my build, so I'll swap that so it's all the same. And then Primed Firestorm you don't really need, because this is just mainly to kill the Acolyte. You're just shooting one guy. And then you can put Prime Dexterity in all these, because since you're finishing off enemies, it counts as melee kills. Sometimes the finisher doesn't kill the enemy, and the ability does, but most of the time you'll be able to keep up max primary Dexterity stacks. The important thing is that you need a Corpus build, because you cannot finish off some Corpus enemies, because their shield is too insane. So to have a thing that can kill them, you'll need a primary with Toxin on it. So this is the build that I use for that. Then the pet I use is the standard meta Panzer Vulpaphyla, and it's just this build. And I put on Pack Leader because you don't even need to rank it up, because every time you do a finisher, it's just going to max out the health of your Vulpaphyla. So the one thing about Marked for Death is that it's not doing the damage that you do to an enemy, it's doing the damage of the amount of health that an enemy loses. So if I kill a Corrupted Butcher without putting on my Silence, it's going to kill very few enemies. Oh, I gotta prime them. So it only killed that Lancer, and it didn't even kill the Corrupted Crewman, didn't even touch that Eximus, and barely did damage to this Gunner. So the reason this works so well with Banshee is because Savage Silence increases the amount of finisher damage that is done, and since the Marked for Death does the same amount of damage, or the same kind of damage, to other enemies, the damage is increased. So even though this Corrupted Crewman has like no health, I'm going to do Silence, hit him, and it did way more damage than that first guy to both of these. And then killing this guy with both of these equipped should probably kill this guy. Yeah. He has way more health than the other two. So when you're targeting enemies to finish them off and do the AoE, you want to go for the one that's in the more opportune spot to hit the most other enemies, since this doesn't go through walls. But if you have a second choice or have another opportunity and there's like a lot of enemies in the same line of sight, you want to go for the highest health one, which would usually be an Eximus. So you just do Silence, shoot him, Marked for Death, and then kill him. And it's absolutely going to kill everything in the area, including other Eximus. Then for the Operator Arcanes, I'm using Magnus Anomaly to pull enemies in when you go in and out of Operator, and then also Magnus Lockdown for some extra CC, and then also to pin the Acolyte down. So I've been working on this build for a long time, and I can definitely say it's kind of a meme. It's not the most meta, and it's not that insane. If the Marked for Death went through walls, and it definitely should, and there's probably some setups where it's even more uber broken, so maybe it shouldn't. But on this build, if this went through walls, it would not be a meme, and it'd be a very good build. Sadly, it doesn't, so the kill rate for this is probably only like 50 to 60 kills per minute, so it's not super awesome for survival, but this can take you through really high-level missions. I've used it in a lot of stuff. Interception is really good because you're just defending a point. Defense is pretty good as long as you have someone else that's doing like CC or defending the point. You can get through 5 rounds by yourself, but you probably won't get through 10. It might be hard to get through an extermination because of how separated enemies are, especially in different tile sets. I found out that survivals are probably the most fun you'll have with this build, and I really like doing it solo. It's just relaxing, and you're just going to be spamming abilities, and it's very satisfying to stay alive because it's a lot of shield gating, a lot of killing enemies, a lot of setup, a lot of strategy. It's pretty cool. So that's all I have for you today. I've had a ton of fun making these builds and using them, and I'll definitely keep doing so. Banshee's not a super used frame, so this was pretty cool to do. I don't see many things online about her. I've seen builds like mine. My idea was original for this Nuke build, but I've seen it online after the fact, after I started looking around. Mine's definitely the best because no one's probably made one in the last 2 years, and Archon Shards really help out this build, but it's way more viable than it used to be. It can definitely go the distance for an endurance run, but the meta build is just going to always be solid. Gloom Banshee is forever amazing, and if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments down below. If there's anything you want to say, do the same. Please leave a like if you liked the video, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. See ya.